Now, just a handful of states could decide the next 4 years. With the election still too close to call, Donald Trump says that he has already won it, threatening legal action if he doesn't. Joe Biden says that he's on track for victory, urging his supporters to hold their nerve. An election held in the midst of a global pandemic has brought voters to the polls, but crucially also posting their ballots in historic numbers. But so far, those postal votes in particular have not delivered a clear winner. We can say this: it's been the biggest turnout in any presidential election since 1900. Joe Biden is expected to win the popular vote, although the margin won't be confirmed for days or even weeks. But in a presidential election, it's not the popular vote that counts, it is the electoral college votes. The winning candidate needs to get 270 of those, and the presidency is theirs. Almost all the states allocate their electors on a winner-takes-all basis. That's why you hear a lot about a path to victory, winning enough of the key states to make it over that threshold. So let's look at the results so far. Blue for Biden's Democrats, red for the Republicans and Trump. When you see how they translate into electoral college votes, Joe Biden has 227 and Donald Trump has notched up 213 votes towards that magic 270. So this is how the results that have been called already look on the map. As for the states that are still counting, there are 4 key states where Joe Biden leads and could take the presidency if he can retain that lead. Officials in Nevada have said that there'll be no result there before tomorrow in a tight race. But in Arizona, Wisconsin, where the Trump team have already demanded a recount, as well as Michigan, Joe Biden is edging ahead as ever more postal votes are counted. A night and a morning to remember. Our Washington correspondent Siobhan Kennedy has the story so far.
Well, look at this. NBC News is projecting Donald Trump will be the ultimate winner in Florida, and it's 20.
It was the moment that the Democrats, huddled together in front of a giant screen near the White House, had been dreading. Around midnight, amid a record voter turnout, the president was declared the winner in the bellwether battleground of Florida, the first clue that the Democrats' projected sea of blue was veering off course.
We can now call Texas for the President of the United States.
Soon after, the president secured the second of the night's biggest prizes, Texas. And in the early hours, rural working-class voters in Iowa and Ohio handed him victory in those contested states too.
The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Donald Trump took one look at his margins in the other battleground states, and despite the fact the vote count was ongoing, he nonetheless strode out and did exactly what he'd been threatening to do for weeks.
This is a fraud on the American public.
Declaring himself the winner and the remaining vote count a fraud.
This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
But Donald Trump has not won it, because even by lunchtime the following day, he still hasn't reached the 270 electoral college votes required to become the US president. And America won't know who has until officials finish counting the millions of postal votes sent by mail because of the virus in the must-have Midwest states of Wisconsin, Michigan and Pennsylvania.
So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? We will win this, and as far as I'm concerned, we already have.
All the voting has stopped, and yet the president insists that counting legitimate postal ballots is somehow an illegitimate process, open to fraud. And it just so happens that the majority of those postal ballots are thought to be Democratic, and in states where COVID-19 meant voters tended to favour Joe Biden. Landing the president a gentle rebuke from the Republicans' top senator.
Claiming you win the election is different from finishing the counting. And what we're going to see here in the next few days, both in the Senate races and in the presidential race, is each state will ultimately get to a final outcome. And you should not be shocked. Both sides are going to have lawyers there.
Joe Biden said he wouldn't stand by and let Donald Trump steal the election.
As I've said all along, it's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people.
Adding further tension, Georgia and North Carolina, states Biden had hoped to turn blue, were both too close to call.
This is a big development.
Yeah.
The Fox News decision desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden.
But he did successfully flip Arizona, a state that hasn't voted for a Democratic president since Bill Clinton. It was the educated suburbs that won it for Biden there, making up for his failure to court Latino voters in anything like the numbers he needed elsewhere.
I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it was going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted.
But perhaps the biggest upset of them all was that the polls that led people to believe Joe Biden had a commanding lead over Donald Trump didn't deliver, leaving Biden now engaged in a nail-biting battle to the end in states that only yesterday had him as the clear winner. Well, we've now entered the world of spin and counter-spin as the lawyers have begun to pile in on both sides. Since this morning, President Trump is still ahead in Pennsylvania with 20% of postal ballots still to count, which, remember, are thought to favour Joe Biden. But without Pennsylvania, there's still a path for Joe Biden to win because he's now nudged ahead in the two key battleground states of Michigan and Wisconsin. Michigan, we know, is expected to come back with a clear picture of its results tonight, though the president has appealed for a halt to the count there. And Wisconsin said within the last hour or so that it had finished counting all the ballots bar the final 300 votes. Biden's camp is spinning. He's won Wisconsin, but Donald Trump plans that immediate recount of Wisconsin because the race is so close there. And because of what they're calling irregularities in several Wisconsin counties, although they gave no details about what those irregularities are. So on the one hand, we're tantalizingly close to a result here, yet on the other, with the prospect of lawyers and recounts and even the Supreme Court, we could still wait for days or even weeks for that result.
Gosh, Siobhan, thank you very much. Well, the bitterly contested state of Pennsylvania has a precious 20 electoral college seats in the balance. It is Joe Biden's birthplace, but he has not got the clear victory he was hoping for there. Donald Trump has held more rallies there than anywhere else. It could yet be decisive if Joe Biden's lead slip elsewhere. But it could be a long wait for a result. The governor has already warned that the votes might not all be counted until Friday. President Trump has a clear advantage so far, but observers believe that many of the votes yet to come in are from Democratic strongholds. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, reports from Philadelphia.
Counting. Through yesterday night, today, tonight, probably at least until late tomorrow.
Make no mistake, our democracy is being tested in this election. This is a stress test of the ideals upon which this country was founded. And the basic rule of one person, one vote, that still carries, and it has to carry here.
The delay, as predicted, is tallying some 2.5 million mail-in ballots across the state, many in the city of Philadelphia.
When half of the votes in the city are cast by mail and half of the votes are at the polling place, counting votes cast by mail, if you're going to do it right and you're going to do it accurately, because there's no other choice, takes a little bit of time.
In the small, leafy town of Phoenixville to the south, the few people who were up and about on this quiet, uncertain morning were less than impressed by the conduct of the poll. Who do you think won the election?
I think Trump won the election. To be honest, I wish they would just hold all the votes, not make it seem like a sporting event, and just release them all when the time's ready, when all the votes are in.
Well, I would like to be sure that every vote is counted, and if we've done this mail-in process and they've designated it to be that these 3 days, everything should be counted, then absolutely. I think fair is fair.
Once they come out with the answer, everyone's just going to let loose, regardless of who it is. It's just not going to be a good ending, I feel like. It's just going to be the beginning of all these controversies. People are going to be saying that, you know, it was rigged because of all the waiting, and it's just going to be a whole thing. It's going to be bad.
Already, the Republicans have mounted 3 lawsuits in Pennsylvania that could throw a close result into doubt for weeks or months.
What we've been doing all along with all the litigation that's been flying this year is we have a mix of in-house and outside counsel.
Rocky Balboa is one of Philadelphia's most famous, if fictional, sons. But there's been no knockout punch in this election.
So, Lindsay, what's the latest on the tally?
Well, Matt, they're counting in the convention centre behind me, and they've got up to 56% of the mail-in ballots, but that still leaves more than 1 million to count. Now, those are, as you said before, likely to be Democrat. So the Democrats are edging up, but this is no blue wave. It's more like a blue trickle. And the problem is that while at the moment President Trump wants them to stop counting here, he said, oh, they're finding ballots in Pennsylvania. They're not finding ballots, they're counting ballots. But he was also likely, I think, if it remains very tight, to ask for a recount here, as he's doing in Wisconsin. Now, that is a process that could take a long time. And with all the lawyers in, you know, we could get a result that could change it here in Pennsylvania. It could go for Biden. And then there could be weeks and weeks before you have a real result in what could still be the key state.
Lindsay, thanks very much. So the stage is now set for a potential legal battle over the legitimacy of America's democratic process. But joining me now is Tom Dupree, a constitutional expert and lawyer. He also worked as Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Department of Justice during George W. Bush's administration. Thanks for coming on the program, Mr. Dupree. So as if this wasn't complicated enough, and please bear with us, we're all fascinated, but we're not experts. Explain to us what the legality of all this that's going on is. So in Michigan, the Trump administration wants to halt the count, and in Wisconsin, they want a recount. Please explain.
Well, the reason why it's complicated is because our election laws are state-specific. We, by and large, don't have a federal law that specifies how states are to conduct their elections. And so each state does it slightly differently. What you're going to see, what we're already starting to see, and I think we're going to see a lot more of in the next 24 to 48 hours, are attempts by the campaigns, and right now it's the Trump campaign because they seem to be trailing, to try to do whatever they can to either exclude Biden ballots or to bring additional Trump ballots into the mix. Lawsuits have already been filed. There's talk about seeking recounts in various states. And so the thing for us to keep our eye on is, what is the margin of victory for Joe Biden in some of these states? Because if he has a sufficiently large margin of victory, even if Trump were to prevail on a legal challenge, even if a recount changed a few votes here and there, it may not be enough to flip Pennsylvania or the other states around.
Okay, so to put very simply, if the numbers are big enough for Joe Biden, whatever the lawyers do won't prevent him from getting into the White House.
That's exactly right. You know, I've had cases where you're litigating and you're challenging, and at the end of the day, if all you're going to do is change 200 or 300 votes, even if you have the best legal arguments in the world, it's not going to matter if you're trailing by 10,000 votes.
Okay, so there I was in the middle of the night watching far too much television, and I thought I had a dream when Donald Trump said he was going to go to the Supreme Court, okay? Because the Supreme Court, of course, decided the fate of your old boss, positively, George W. Bush in 2000. Is he going to go to the Supreme Court? Can he go to the Supreme Court?
He can go to the Supreme Court, but not directly. The way it would work is that they first would have to litigate something in the trial court. They would then move up one step to the Court of Appeals, and then and only then would they get into the Supreme Court. There is one case right now that's pending in Pennsylvania that currently is sitting there in the Supreme Court. And I suspect that what the Trump campaign strategy is going to be, assuming this election boils down as it may to the state of Pennsylvania, is to ask the United States Supreme Court to overrule the decision of our Pennsylvania Supreme Court that extended the deadline for these mail-in ballots to arrive by a few days. The Trump campaign is hopeful that if you jettison all of those ballots, maybe it changes the outcome in Pennsylvania and hence the outcome of the election.
Okay, you are the world's most important democracy. All eyes are on you right now. The most important principle here, is it not, is that every vote should be counted that was cast legally.
I agree with that. Every vote that was cast legally should be counted. And I suspect what the armies of lawyers that are invading Pennsylvania and other states at this moment are going to argue is they're going to say there are certain ballots that were not cast legally, or if they were cast legally in a nominal sense, it's because, say, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court improperly tampered with the law. So I think we can all agree with that principle you articulated, but the talented lawyers on both sides of this are going to be arguing about whether these ballots were or were not cast legally.
Okay, Tom Dupree, thank you very much indeed.